Choosing to marry Bob was my decision, so even if it was a mistake, the responsibility is mine. But everyone makes mistakes in judgment. My name is Mary, a 33-year-old married woman with a son in elementary school. I'm toiling away at a small to mid-sized company run by my father-in-law Mike and my husband Bob. People say it's rude to say toiling away, since I became the wife of a business owner. Even my own parents and friends have scolded me, calling it a luxury. But in reality, I'm being overworked by Mike, Bob, and the company. Originally, I was hired as an office worker. It was the company I was introduced to while looking for a job after graduating from community college. They paid me a salary until I married Bob. But then, wanting me to marry, Mike and Bob made me work without pay after the wedding. Being a small business, most of the staff were either Mike's relatives or Bob's friends. Lots of connections. I was tasked with everything, from administrative work to accounting and general affairs, along with countless other menial tasks. Due to cost cutting, I was even in charge of cleaning. Jim, a veteran among the staff, taught me the ropes. Jim, a distant relative of Mike, is a kind soul who helps me with my grueling tasks.
I'm sorry I didn't tell you. You were married off to work for free, just like Janet was.
Janet was my mother-in-law, a refined, calm, and kind woman, one of my few allies. According to Jim, Janet was actually Mike's cousin. Her parents decided on a marriage that turned out to be even more challenging than mine. My son Henry is kind-hearted and worries about his mother in these harsh conditions. But Bob, Janet's son, was similar to Mike. Arrogant, blustering, and never sparing a thought for his struggling mother, Janet. A man who doesn't cherish his own mother won't cherish his wife either. In this company, in this home, that kind of justice prevailed. Janet was very kind to me. She helped me, overwhelmed with housework and my job. Mike and Bob piled work on me and then expected me to take care of the household too. When I laid out takeout from the deli due to exhaustion, it caused an outrage. Even when Janet said, "Mary is tired. I will help her," it was to no avail.
You're supposed to devote yourself to me once we're married. Stay out of this.
Janet did her best to support me, but there were limits. After Bob had a son, he stopped paying attention to me. He'd disappear, leaving the house for days on end. Mike did the same. Yet they had the audacity to call me and Janet useless.
A woman who can only bear one child is useless. Henry isn't cute like Mary. Is he really my child?
They don't understand how much their words can hurt someone. My dignity has been shattered repeatedly by Mike and Bob. Since getting married, I've been burdened with various tasks to the point of exhaustion. It was only Janet's support that kept me from collapsing from overwork. With no wages paid, I couldn't afford to buy clothes or even get a proper haircut. Janet would secretly give me an allowance. She also shared her limited wardrobe and jewelry with me. Janet, skilled at sewing, would remake her precious dresses into new ones for me. "I'm sorry this is all I can do for you." The clothes Janet crafted with love were beautiful. Above all, I was grateful for Janet's warm heart. "Thank you, Janet. I can't believe you fixed my favorite dress," I said with tears in my eyes. And Janet just smiled. In her youth, Janet had attended a fashion design school, so she was a whiz with a needle and thread. She confided in me that she never wanted to marry Mike. She knew all too well his arrogant ways, having grown up with him as her cousin. But her parents had arranged it, and she felt she had no choice but to comply. After the wedding, Janet was treated terribly and was deeply unhappy. Even while pregnant, she was overworked by Mike. I was living the same fate. If Janet hadn't been there to help me, working right up until my due date, both my baby and I would have been in danger. Bob, who felt no love for his son Henry, never lifted a finger to help with the baby. And Henry, he never grew attached to his father or grandfather. He saw them as adversaries, witnessing how they treated his mother and grandmother. Henry was always by our side during the tough times. Despite his young age, he was aware that he was the man of the house. This didn't amuse Mike and Bob at all. When Henry showed defiance, Mike and Bob blamed me.
He doesn't respect his grandfather. That's on you and your bad parenting. You're to blame for not educating him right. You're useless.
They'd yell. I was so frustrated I felt like crying. But Henry, as smart as he is, caught on quickly. He knew his father and grandfather were the worst. For a 10-year-old, Henry spoke like an adult. And when it came to defending Janet and me, he was organized and direct in confronting Mike and Bob.
You can't expect blind respect, not for a father or grandfather who don't deserve it. Can't you see that?
Mike and Bob were furious with Henry's words. They scolded him for being insolent, but Henry completely ignored them. Mike tried to win Henry over with a hefty allowance, but it only made Henry despise him more. Bob tried to convince Henry of mine and Janet's incompetence, which backfired. Henry put an end to that by saying,
"It's despicable to insult your wife and mother like that."
In private, Henry urged me to give up.
"Mom, just get a divorce. Staying in this house is only making us miserable."
He was right, but it was impossible for me. I had cried to my parents about how hard my life was, but they just scolded me for not being patient enough and being ungrateful to a relatively wealthy husband. So even if I divorced, I couldn't rely on my parents' home. And for a 33-year-old woman capable of only clerical and menial tasks, there was no hope. Above all, if I divorced, I risked losing custody of Henry, the heir to the company. If I left, Janet would be stuck in that house alone. I could never abandon kind-hearted Janet. So I endured Mike and Bob's treatment and kept on living. Henry and Janet watched me grow more worn out each day, worried sick about me. The only kind person at the company, Jim, had to quit. His wife fell seriously ill and needed his care. Mike forced him out, deciding that his situation was a liability to the work. It was ruthless how quickly Mike discarded Jim after years of loyal service to the company. Jim retired with only a modest pension and left, used up and then discarded when no longer needed. The atmosphere at the company grew even more uncomfortable without him. Exhausted, I began to lose my sense of purpose in life. It was then that a turning point arrived. It was time for Henry's school open day and the parent-teacher meeting. During the class observation, Henry was solving math problems with evident joy. Other parents looked on admiringly at his intelligence. Though he's the son of Bob and me, Henry has exceptional talents. A mother sitting next to me whispered, "You're Henry's mom, right? My son and Henry are good friends." As I managed a weary smile, the woman's face fell with concern. Worried I had offended her, another parent, a man, suggested in a low voice,
"You look pale. It might be best to sit and join us."
The teacher nodded with a smile at his suggestion. Resting on an available chair, I continued to watch over Henry. Henry kept glancing my way. All of Henry's classmates' parents were kind. The kindness of the other parents was a rarity for me, except from Henry and Janet. After the class, there was a parent-teacher meeting. I was surprised to see not only mothers, but also fathers in attendance. Mike and Bob always declared that parenting was the mother's duty. My parents had similar views. But the reality is that parenting requires mutual support. There was a simple round of introductions among the parents that day. Everyone introduced themselves with a warm smile. When it came my turn to introduce myself, I nearly fainted as I stood up. The man who had offered me a seat earlier suggested I remain seated. He was the same parent who had been considerate during the class.
"I'm a doctor. I took the day off from the hospital to be here,"
he said. After observing me for a moment, he concluded it was clear I was suffering from overwork.
"You're sleep-deprived and not eating well. You need rest."
At his words, I couldn't help but break down crying. When I saw it was impossible for me to rest, the teacher, who had been silent, spoke up.
"Henry has been consulting me for a while. Today, we're changing the agenda of this meeting."
All the parents readily agreed. Henry's homeroom teacher had been consulting with Henry for some time. The teacher had been listening to Henry's concerns about Mike and Bob's arrogant behavior. Henry always mentioned how they treated me and Janet terribly. He said we had to act fast, or things would get worse for Janet and me. Henry had been open with the teacher about our home situation. The teacher believed Henry and wanted to help. But as a teacher, He couldn't recklessly interfere in family matters. However, seeing my current state, the teacher decided immediate action was necessary.
I apologize for intervening in your private matters, but Henry is asking for help. We can't overlook a situation that threatens a child's happiness.
The parents, including the doctor, concurred. Speaking on behalf of everyone, the doctor asked me,
Please tell us what you can about your troubles. There's always something we can do to help.
I slowly began to reveal the hardships I've faced since getting married. Working tirelessly at the company, being expected to do perfect housework, and facing verbal abuse if I ever took a rest. The only allies I had were Henry and Janet, and I couldn't rely on my family. The teacher and other parents lost their words upon realizing the extent of the tragedy. As I explained, I started to cry. A woman nearby, noticing I was struggling, kindly handed me a handkerchief. She was the mother of Henry's friend and expressed her son's fondness for him. Seeing me in tears, she gently rubbed my back. And though her encouragement was firm, she asked decisively, "You've endured a lot, but crying alone won't solve anything, Mary. What do you want to do? Please tell me exactly what you're thinking." Choked up with tears, I confessed my true feelings. "I want a divorce. I can't stand to endure anymore. Life is just too hard," I exclaimed, wanting to take Janet and leave home. The woman quietly nodded and pulled out her business card. It read law office. She and her husband both worked as attorneys. Her son had noticed something was off with Henry and had discussed it with his parents. Henry's friends had sensed that his home life was not all right. "You can consult me through a message. I'll teach you how to keep it from your husband, and it's free. Consider it my meddling," she said firmly with a lively smile. The watching parents also cheered me on. With Henry's help, I realized I had gathered many allies. Thanks to Henry's help, I have made many allies. I decided to divorce so as not to worry my son anymore. From then on, I slowly started preparing for divorce. When I told Henry, he said he would stick with me. I also informed Janet about the divorce preparations. Janet agreed eagerly and dropped a bombshell of her own. "I'm getting a divorce too. Without Mary and Henry, I have no attachment to this house." And so, Janet and I moved forward with our divorce preparations together. As for custody, the scales were overwhelmingly in my favor. According to Henry's friend's parent, even if Bob had financial means, his lack of involvement in parenting made him unsuitable to nurture. I could demand child support and live with Henry. But even if I could claim compensation, I still needed to work. Without a certain level of financial stability, I would be deemed unfit for childcare. Having time to care for a child was also crucial. Long hours of neglect would naturally work against me. Considering this, I was searching for a job. Both Janet and I had every right to claim compensation for our divorce. Years of unpaid labor, verbal attacks wounding spousal dignity, and the ultimate betrayal by our spouses. Mike and Bob had both mistaken their wives' compliance. They had no idea they were grasping at their greatest vulnerability. Janet and I were energetically preparing for our divorces. Divorce preparations are said to be exhausting, but we were moving forward with joy. I hadn't felt this happy since before I got married. Janet and I were deciding on the time to declare our divorces. Mike's business was shaking. Failure seemed certain. With the company's cash flow tight, Mike and Bob were getting irritated. And I had a source feeding me information. Jim, who was ousted after his wife fell ill. He cared for his sick wife while working for another company. Jim was bitter about being deemed expendable and pushed out of the company. That's when he switched to a job where he could work behind the scenes to bring about its downfall. Basically, it was a company that lent money. Mike must have been struggling with finances since he took out a loan from Jim's company. Jim kept me updated every step of the way. Mike couldn't see through Jim's intentions. He didn't realize that taking a loan here meant huge interest would pile up.
"Looks like bankruptcy is on the horizon. The debt is substantial. There's no way he can pay the settlement."
"We'll collect without mercy. Feel free to exploit Mike and Bob as you wish." Then the day we had been waiting for arrived. Mike's company went bankrupt. All the other employees had been warned by me in advance and had fled. Only Mike and Bob were left, abandoned. Seeing Mike and Bob burdened with debt and despair was exhilarating. Janet seemed to feel the same. Her smile said it all. Janet and I whipped Bob's despair further into frenzy. "We're getting a divorce. Yes, sign these divorce papers." "Me too. I'm divorcing as well. Please take care of this." Mike and Bob were shocked by our simultaneous divorce filings. Janet and I had been waiting for this moment. We could finally retaliate when those who tormented us were at their most miserable. Mike and Bob started to rage about our actions on their own.
"You're abandoning us."
"Of course. You never saw me as your wife, did you?" Just as Mike and Bob were about to shout back, Janet chimed in seamlessly. "And you've been having affairs, right? I know about it. Idiot men." Usually poised, Janet's remarks left Mike and Bob speechless. Janet and I unleashed all our pent-up frustration, resentment, and anger on Mike and Bob. Then we made them sign the divorce papers and said mercilessly, "You'll pay the compensation and child support even with the debt. Janet, Henry is waiting. Let's go." "Yes, goodbye. Strangers now." Mike and Bob stood there dumbfounded as Janet and I left them behind, divorced. Now a single mother, I live with Henry and Janet. I was working at a job recommended by a lawyer who was a mom friend who helped us, while aiming for a certification at the law firm. I work full-time and Janet helps me with household chores and childcare. But that's not all. Janet also makes use of her sewing skills working from home. She does dress alterations, which have been very well received. My son Henry has been doing well since the divorce. He plays happily with his friends. My parents have apologized since the divorce. They were sorry for not realizing how hard things were for me. They asked me to come back and live at home, but I refused. I didn't see my parents as allies. It was more enjoyable living just with Henry and Janet. In my experience, parents are not always on your side. I learned not to have expectations. The ones who reached out to me, aside from Henry and Janet, were not my relatives. Henry's teachers and all the parents gathered together. Those who could have ignored us stepped in to help. Without their efforts, Janet and I would still be in dire straits. I'm truly grateful from the bottom of my heart. Mike and Bob were chased by debts. Jim was cheerfully collecting. Thanks to him, the compensation and child support are being deposited without fail. On a day off, I had tea with some of Henry's classmates' parents who had been kind to us. It was then that one of the moms shared the news. Mike collapsed under the weight of his debts. Bob planned to skip town to avoid his debts, but he was stopped. Now he's working hard labor on a big ship, Jim's referral. I don't know the specifics of the job, but I thought, let him work all he likes, and I hope Mike suffers as much as possible. When I got home and told Janet about Mike and Bob's situation, she laughed. With Henry not around, we laughed without reservation. I can't wait to claim the next compensation payment. Janet, relentless, demanded the compensation even after hearing Mike had collapsed. I'm busy working as a judicial scrivener after getting my qualification. Henry thinks I'm cool. Mike, evidently exhausted, said he wants to see his grandson. That's up to Henry, so I asked him if he wanted to meet Mike. Innocently, Henry smiled and said, "I'll go visit." Jim took Henry to see Mike on behalf of Janet and me. Henry returned home without incident, but the next day Mike passed away. None of us, not I, Henry, or Janet, attended the funeral. It was doubtful there were any attendees. Out of distant kinship, Jim took care of the burial and all. When I called to thank him, Jim responded kindly.
"My wife has settled down too. Sorry for the worry."
When I replied, "That's good," Jim chuckled a bit. Jim praised Henry for being great when he went to see Mike. I believe kind Henry had cheered up bedridden Mike. Mike must have been content to see his grandson one last time. Janet and I had believed that for years. But the truth came out when Henry went to high school. Jim had kept a secret. There was no direct evidence linking Henry to Mike's situation. Henry is a bright boy. He's kind and treasures Janet and me greatly. But he had been dealing punishment to Mike, who had treated him so poorly. Not physically, but psychologically. Henry smiled as he plunged debt-ridden Mike into the depths of despair. With a smile, Henry innocently joked,
"Dad's ship has capsized."
That was a complete lie. Bob is still on a ship paying off his debts. Years later, I scolded Henry, telling him lies are not okay. He swore to never say it again. Obeying our instructions, Henry no longer tells lies that cause despair. Yet he absolutely refuses to meet his father, Bob. For Bob, the greatest misery isn't the divorce or debts, but being seen as sunk by his own son. But fortunately, he hasn't sunk, so I continue to demand child support.
I've wanted kids, but it's your fault I've had to hold back. You're defective. My husband of 20 years threw these cruel words at me. I realized I couldn't carry on with him. He's off daydreaming about his new marriage. God must have been watching, witnessing this devilish act. That's why something happened to my husband. My name is Lisa. I'm 45 years old. I work as a secretary at a law firm. We're nearing 20 years of marriage. We've led a modest life, just the two of us. We've always wanted children, but we couldn't have any. The problems seemed to be mostly with me. I went for treatments while working, exhausting myself physically, emotionally, and financially, but to no avail. We decided to give up when I turned 40. My husband wanted kids till the end and urged me to continue treatments, but I was at my limit. The pain was unbearable, and the money was just draining away. The situation was terrifying. After all, they say you need $200,000 for retirement. It felt wasteful to pour more money into it. Why don't we stop the treatments and just live as a couple? We can save money and take some luxurious trips since we don't have kids, I suggested, and my husband, albeit reluctantly, agreed. From then on, we decided to enjoy our lives as a couple. Still, seeing children's photos on TV shows or greeting cards, I felt a twinge of regret. Even now, 5 years after stopping treatments, I carry guilt and remorse for not being able to have children. Then, one day, I decided to attend a school reunion after about 10 years. My husband said I should take a break, so I decided to stay overnight near the venue. It felt like a mini vacation. I realized I'd hardly ever been out alone since we got married. My life had been consumed by infertility treatments. A little luxury now and then is okay, right? At the venue, I enjoyed catching up with old friends. "Lisa, long time no see. How are you? Don't you seem a bit slimmer than before?" Indeed, I had lost about 22 pounds over the last decade. "I'm so jealous. Since I got married and had kids, I've gained almost 33 pounds. Even such a trivial conversation from a friend stings a bit. "Lisa, any kids?" "No, we couldn't. It's just the two of us with my husband." "Oh, I'm sorry for asking such an awkward question." "No worries. Let's just have fun." I tried to keep the atmosphere lively and cheerful. Speaking of which, my son was recently almost caught up in a marriage scam. A scam? I was taken aback by my classmates' words. Yes, he was asked to lend $20,000 because they were getting married, but it didn't go through. What? What happened then? My son couldn't afford to pay that much money, so he came to us, his parents, for advice. That's how we discovered the scam. In the end, the woman disappeared. That's a terrifying story. There are some pretty awful women out there, really scary. A marriage scam. I was a bit shocked that something like that could happen so close to home. Her son now has a new girlfriend, and the parents seemed relieved. The reunion went on smoothly and eventually came to an end. Instead of going to the after party, I returned to my hotel and enjoyed a nightcap by myself. Come to think of it, I forgot to check in with my husband. It was only 10 p.m., he should still be up. I tried to call home. But no matter how many times I let it ring, my husband didn't answer. Maybe he had already gone to sleep. Well, I was going back tomorrow anyway, so it wasn't a problem. Still, I had an uneasy feeling. Was it a woman's intuition? I had a bad feeling for some reason. From then on, my husband started coming home extremely late on weekdays, and he started coming home drunk almost every night. "Hey, I'm home." "You, coming home so drunk. Are you okay?" In a drunken stupor, my husband threw his shoes off and sprawled out on the living room floor. "Shut up, I'm home. Show some respect." Respect for what, exactly? His slovenly state? While picking up my husband's discarded socks and shirt, I kept my thoughts to myself. Alyssa was cute, wasn't she? You know, if you were as young as Alyssa. That's what my husband said. Who the hell is Alyssa? What does he mean if I were young? By the time I thought to question him, he was already fast asleep. Could he be cheating on me? My unease from that day was becoming more and more like conviction. No, my husband is a decent man. There's no way he could. It must be drunken nonsense, I reassured myself. But then there's my husband who leaves early in the morning on weekends and doesn't return until late at night. "I'll be back later. Take care." And then he comes home drunk, as always. With this happening every week, even I had to intervene. "You seem to be going out drinking almost every day recently. Are we okay financially?" "Mind your own business. It's my money and I'll do what I want with it. It's the savings from my bachelor days." "But we need to save up for our old age or we'll be in trouble in the future." "Why don't you save up then?" "Well, I've spent quite a bit on treatments." "That's because you're defective." Even if he was drunk, I couldn't believe he'd speak to me that way. I was starting to notice my husband's changes. Did I become more submissive since I stopped treatment? My husband's disparaging remarks about me were increasing. "Since you can't have kids, you should show your affection for me instead." And with that, I could feel my love for him diminishing as he splurged and behaved selfishly. He used to be so kind, caring for me when I was having a hard time with treatments. Will he ever return to being that kind of husband? What is a marriage, really? After 20 years, I started to question this. However, things took a sudden turn. "Lisa, we need to talk." I came home from work to find my husband sitting on the living room sofa, looking serious. "What is it? You're being all formal." "I want a divorce." "What? You're joking, right? Why would you say that all of a sudden?" The thought that my husband was considering a divorce had never crossed my mind. Yes, I knew we had to reconsider our relationship as a married couple, but I hadn't thought about divorce. Was my husband thinking of divorce before I even considered it? "Out of the blue, you want a divorce? What's going on?" I confronted my husband, seeking answers. "We've been a couple for 20 years, haven't we? Let's discuss this properly." However, he looked at me with contempt. "You're really clueless, aren't you?" He sighed heavily, glaring at me. "What do you mean?" "I've always wanted children for these past 20 years. And because I got stuck with a defective piece like you, I've been robbed of the opportunity to become a father. Have you ever considered my feelings?" As he spoke, he pounded the table with an arrogant tone. "That's not fair. We discussed together and decided to stop the treatments, remember? I was never okay with that. I've always wanted a child." Why hadn't he told me that then? I was on the verge of tears, overwhelmed by sadness and frustration. "Well, if you sign the divorce papers, I won't have anything else to say." Proudly, he pushed the divorce papers on the table towards me. "I've actually already decided to remarry." "What? Remarry?" "Yeah, with a 20-year-old girl." "A girl? Are you saying you've been having an affair?" "No way. I plan on marrying her as soon as we're divorced." He announced this with a smug satisfaction. A 20-year-old girl was marrying my husband? This couldn't be happening. "Alyssa, she's sweet and cute. The perfect wife. Not like you." Alyssa. That was the name my husband had mentioned that day. Woman's intuition was not to be underestimated. I felt a sense of self-satisfaction, but this wasn't the time for self-praise. And then my husband showed me a picture of his adorable Alyssa. Upon taking a closer look, I nearly burst out laughing. This has to be a joke. Something like this was impossible. What? He noticed my strange reaction, but I quickly regained my composure. I felt it was too soon to let him in on the joke, so I immediately composed myself. So you really want a child that badly? Yes, because you can't give birth. There's nothing we can do about that, right? You will agree to divorce, won't you? Well, I suppose there's no choice. I pretend to look more upset than I really am. Sure, I was upset when he first brought up the divorce, but now, with his sheer stupidity, I feel like it would be right to divorce him immediately. Yes, I should leave a man like this sooner or later. I feel as if I've been given divine guidance to do so. I sign the divorce papers and leave my husband behind. I'll bet he'll regret this soon enough. Well, let's just watch and see. Fast forward a year after the divorce. Lisa, please help me. A shabby-looking man approaches me on my way home from work. Excuse me, who are you? I genuinely don't recognize him. It's me, Lisa. I need your help. It's my ex-husband. Long time no see. I'm taken aback by how much he's changed. His cheeks are sunken, and he's dressed shabbily. Please, Alice, introduce me to your company's lawyer. I can't just do that out of the blue. Apparently, my ex-husband is having money troubles. I could sort of tell from his appearance, but I never thought he would become a completely different person within a year. If it's your first time, consultation is free. Free? But if you want to hire them, you'll have to pay their fee. I don't have that kind of money. Please, help me. What on earth happened? I decided to listen to his story at a nearby cafe out of pity. Well, actually, before he could say another word, I cut him off. Did that girl, Alyssa, run off? How did you know? Just as I thought. When my ex-husband showed me a picture of a girl named Alyssa, it clicked. That girl looked exactly like the one who conned a classmate's son at a reunion. At that reunion, the classmate was saying, "I can't forgive that woman," and showed her picture around, warning everyone. I think her name was Sally and she was about 22. Well, her age and name are probably fake. It makes sense. The swindler wouldn't use her real name, of course. You knew about Alyssa, didn't you? Well, I guess you could say I knew, but what happened? When I asked my husband for the details, this was the story he gave. He met a woman named Alyssa about a year ago in a nightclub. My husband, who has always wanted children, seemed to have been venting such thoughts in his conversations with her. That's when Alyssa said, "I can have a child for you." The two gradually deepened their relationship after that. My husband would go to the club almost every weekday and would date Alyssa outside the club on weekends, then return to the club. In doing so, he ended up using $10,000 from his savings that he had accumulated when he was single. But Alyssa was so sweet. She never asked for expensive things even when we were outside the club. She was just happy drinking with me at the club. She was different from the stereotypical opportunistic club girls you often hear about. She didn't need designer goods or jewelry. She was satisfied if I was there drinking with her at the club. She was hardworking and sincere. We had agreed not to touch each other's savings from when we were single, so I never noticed anything. I thought it was his money and he could use it as he pleased. I had no idea he was spending that much. And then Alyssa showed her true colors. "I want to get married, but I have debts, so I need to repay them, and it's about $20,000. Then my husband promised to take on Alyssa's debt and transferred the money to her. They moved in together right after our divorce, but Alyssa continued her night work and rarely came home. And then she quit her job at the club and disappeared. Of course, she took all the money and ran. Just how foolish can he be? I started to feel pathetic for having been married to such a man for 20 years. Did you make a promissory note? A what? When I asked, my husband looked puzzled. You lent her money, didn't you? Didn't you get a note? We were going to be a couple, so I didn't do such a thing. Really? So doesn't it mean you just gave her the money? Is that so? In this case, it seems like you donated $20,000 to Alyssa out of goodwill. This woman must be a pro. In the case of donations, if the amount exceeds $11,000 in a year, gift tax is imposed. Depending on the case, the receiver might be taxed, so Alyssa just took $20,000 in cash and vanished. And she split the money into 2 parts across 2 different years. That way she wouldn't exceed the $11,000 limit and could avoid taxes. The reason my husband thought she was a good girl who never asked for material gifts was because she knew the law well. So what should I do? I don't know, maybe consult a lawyer? It'll cost you though. Upon hearing that, my husband's shoulders slumped. I've used up all my savings from my single days. The woman I loved ran away from me. I can't tell the company that the marriage is off after I've already told them about remarrying. I boasted about getting a younger wife. Isn't that his own doing? Although I thought that, seeing his pitiful situation, I couldn't say anything. Lisa, it's my fault. Please, come back to me. I realized after you were gone, you were the only one who cared about me. I don't need kids anymore. I'll let you do as you like. You must have been lonely too, right? Does my husband still misunderstand that I still love him? That matter ended half a year ago in my mind, so I confronted him with reality. You know, it's been a year. What's with this sudden change of heart? Isn't it a little too late now? Lisa, are you going to abandon me? Well, it was you who pushed for our divorce in the first place, remember? Lisa, you're the only one I can rely on. My ex-husband looked utterly exhausted. I decided to show him a little mercy. All right then, shall I call up a lawyer friend of mine? Lisa, thank you. I knew I could count on you. With tears welling up in his eyes, my ex-husband seemed genuinely grateful. And the one who came to the coffee shop was Mr. Johnson, the lawyer from my company. John, over here. Lisa, who's this? He's an acquaintance. Seems he's in a bit of a bind. Is that so? Nice to meet you. The name's Johnson. My ex-husband seemed somewhat perplexed by our overly familiar demeanor. You see, we've been dating for the past 6 months. Now what was it you needed advice on? As I finished speaking, my ex-husband looked as if he was in a daze. No, well, I think that'll be it for today. Suddenly snapping back to reality, my ex-husband hurriedly left the coffee shop. In the end, he couldn't afford to hire a lawyer and resigned himself to his fate. Rumor has it that his company has been abuzz with talk of his unfortunate situation, left by his soon-to-be wife, ignored by his ex-wife. It's a small world. Who would have thought that one of his colleagues was at the same coffee shop, overhearing the entire conversation from start to finish? I heard through the grapevine that he's frantically trying to find a new partner, terrified of facing old age alone. Who was that guy? When Mr. Johnson asked me about it later, I told him the whole story. I'm sorry for involving you in all this. The truth is... I see. You've had quite the ordeal, Lisa. The part about me dating Mr. Johnson was a complete lie. I had asked him to play along with the charade. Sorry for all the trouble. No worries, Lisa. I'm glad I could be of help. By the way, do you have any plans after this? Excuse me? How about grabbing something to eat if you'd like? Caught off guard by this unexpected turn of events, I was a little flustered. A fresh start in my mid-40s. This isn't such a bad beginning. Yes, I'd love to. I was certain a fun-filled future was awaiting me. I couldn't shake off this feeling.
If you have a problem with anything, get out of my house, anytime. Right now, I'm being verbally abused by my sister-in-law in my own house, a house that's in my name. I gave her every chance in the world, and she just trampled all over my kindness. I won't show mercy to such a person any longer. I'll make her pay for her actions and make her regret everything she's done. My name is Emma, a 29-year-old housewife. I had been living happily with my husband John, whom I married 2 years ago. My father-in-law passed away before we got married, and 6 months ago, my mother-in-law slipped on the stairs of her apartment and broke her leg. The injury left her with a lingering numbness, and it became difficult for her to continue living as she used to. Given these circumstances, she started living with John and me. The house we live in was passed down to me by my father. My dad loves to travel, and he even bought a motorhome. He left the house he'd been living in to me and started a life in his motorhome with my mother. I decided to take advantage of my father's kindness and began living in the house he'd given me. Now, considering the care for my mother-in-law, I'm glad I accepted the house from my father. Emma, I'm sorry for moving in and needing your care, my mother-in-law said. It's okay, mother-in-law. Please, don't worry about it, I responded. From the first time we met, I liked my mother-in-law because she always maintained a healthy distance. That's why when she got injured and my husband suggested she move in with us, I could accept it without hesitation. Then, one day, a storm blew into our peaceful life. The doorbell rang while I was in the middle of cleaning the house. Yes, who is it? When I opened the front door, there stood my husband's sister, Jessica. Hey there, Emma! Long time no see! Oh, Jessica? Don't be so surprised. We're sister-in-laws after all. Well, about that sister-in-law thing. To be honest, I've never really been fond of my husband's sister, Jessica. She had been living with her husband for quite some time before John and I got married. She recently had a baby, but she demanded a hefty baby gift from my mother-in-law and never let us meet her grandchild. Not to mention, she was utterly selfish at our wedding. This food is awful. Totally killed my mood. She had no problem loudly complaining about everything. When my mother-in-law got injured, she dumped everything onto John, saying, "You're the older brother, aren't you? You should take care of this." She didn't even come to check on my mother-in-law. And of course, she was just as disrespectful to me, saying things like, "So, you're Emma, huh? You're kind of plain." The first time we met. I can never forget the shock of that day. Jessica always has something unnecessary to say, and that's why I never had a good impression of her. When she showed up unannounced that day, I had a bad feeling about it. "Jessica, what brought you here?" I asked. In response to my question, my sister-in-law Jessica shrugged her shoulders rather exaggeratedly. "Well, you see, I'm a little strapped for cash right now. Could you lend me $1,000? No, make that $2,000? What? $2,000? That's too much. I hurriedly retorted, but Jessica showed no sign of backing down. In fact, she even aggressively asked for $1,000. Should I just lend her the money and get her to leave as quickly as possible? A fleeting thought crossed my mind, but given Jessica's personality, once I lent her the money, I knew I wouldn't get it back. I decided to firmly refuse. "No matter how much you ask, I can't. I'm sorry. We have our own lives to live." At that, Jessica's mood worsened abruptly. "Just give me the money. How dare you defy your sister-in-law?" Just as I thought she had shouted enough, she suddenly pushed me on my shoulder, causing me to fall on my rear. Looking down at me, Jessica smirked and extended her hand. "Come on, lend me the money now." That made me really mad. "Can't do. Please leave." I forcibly ejected Jessica and locked the door. "Hey, open up! Are you listening to me?" Jessica shouted from the porch. Reacting to her voice, my mother-in-law handled it for me through the door. "If you're going to make any more noise, I'm calling the police." Jessica instantly quieted down, stating, "Fine, I'll be back," before she left that day. After confirming Jessica's departure, my mother-in-law apologized to me. "Emma, I am really sorry. My daughter caused you so much trouble." "Mother, it's okay. In the end, I didn't lend her any money. But still, I'm truly sorry. It must have been unpleasant for you. My mother-in-law seemed to feel a lot of guilt, and she kept apologizing. I couldn't help but wonder how such an arrogant daughter could have come from such a humble mother. When my husband, John, came home that night, I told him everything that had happened. Upon hearing the story, his face turned beet red with anger. What the? That's too much of a nuisance. Emma, I'm really sorry. I don't even know how to apologize. My husband bowed his head to me. Seeing this, my mother-in-law once again apologized. And so, the day ended with an incredibly awkward dinner. The next day, the intercom rang again. Through the door, I could hear Jessica's cloying voice. Emma, darling, please. I won't do anything weird anymore. Just lend me the money and I'll leave right away. Oh boy, 2 days in a row? Even I was taken aback. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law was out, so I was home alone. I cautiously opened the door with the chain on, and Jessica peeked in with great enthusiasm through the gap. Oh good! You opened it! So, about yesterday... Jessica, like I said before, I can't lend you money. At my preemptive strike, Jessica frowned for a moment, but then quickly began to feign tears. But if things continue like this, I'll starve to death with my daughter. Starve to death? What do you mean? I'm in debt to my husband. Sensing that I had taken the bait, my sister-in-law Jessica immediately responded. Because of these debts, I can't even live properly. I don't even have anything to eat for tomorrow. Do you understand how I feel? Really? Are you kidding me? Who does she think would sympathize with such a cheesy sob story? Does she expect me to say, "Oh, that's tough. Let me lend you some money"? While I felt like pointing out the absurdity of her claim, I responded calmly. I understand you're going through a hard time, but we have our own lives to live. I'm sorry. Upon hearing this, Jessica instantly stopped her sobbing act, and her face twisted into an angry scowl. What? You're just gonna abandon me in my time of need? Seeing this conversation was going nowhere, I quietly closed the door. Jessica was still ranting and raving at the front door. After a while, my mother-in-law returned from her day service. You! Are you causing trouble again? I told you I'd call the police, didn't I? At my mother-in-law's stern words, Jessica hastily made her exit. Emma, I'm sorry you had to deal with all this while I was away. My mother-in-law apologized, looking sorry. I cheerfully replied, Oh, don't worry about it. I kept that chain on the door today. Plus, you returned just in time, so that was a relief. That night, the three of us, my husband John included, were all talking about Jessica. Next time she comes, you don't have to answer. She'll only take advantage if we keep dealing with her. Upon hearing my husband's words, I decided to ignore Jessica from then on. A few days later, after a period of silence, Jessica returned to our house. Ignoring the incessantly ringing doorbell, I suddenly heard a loud, "Ah!" from afar. It clearly wasn't Jessica's voice. Was that a baby crying? Both my mother-in-law and I exchanged glances. Cautiously opening the door, we saw Jessica holding her daughter. Wait, Jessica, what's happening? Yeah, what's the big idea bringing a child here all of a sudden? My mother-in-law and I were in complete panic. Ignoring our shock, Jessica began to explain. So, here's the thing. I just got divorced from my husband. I have nowhere else to go, so I thought I'd stay at your house for a while. Wait, you're planning to stay here? My mother-in-law and I were left speechless. Living with such a nuisance is not a joke. However, we couldn't abandon a crying baby right in front of us. My mother-in-law felt the same. And understandably so, as this was her long-awaited first grandchild. Hey, it's okay, right? I can do household chores and help care for Mom. Jessica, whining like a child. After exchanging glances with my mother-in-law, I sighed deeply. Fine, if it's just for a few days. And so, we ended up taking in Jessica and her child. So, I'll be intruding from now on. Saying that, Jessica strode into the house. My husband John, who just got back from work, was utterly stunned. Why is Jessica here? Well, it's a long story. No kidding. Even my husband, who was furious, seemed completely defeated by the little baby. When you calm down, can you please find a job and look for a house? After saying that to his sister, he left the room. But there was no way that Jessica would help around the house. She only spent her days lounging around, watching TV. Furthermore, she dumped the responsibility of taking care of her child onto me and my mother-in-law, living completely as a NEET. Jessica, could you go shopping for us? If I even dared to ask that, she would completely refuse. Excuse me? Why should I? Isn't that your job, Emma, the housewife? Could you at least clean the house, then? Stop bothering me! Don't order your sister-in-law! This was how our exchanges always went. My mother-in-law and husband had tried to reprimand her several times, but she showed no signs of remorse. Moreover, she used her own daughter as leverage, saying, "Do you want to drive me and my daughter out? Are you okay with us starving?" I, reaching the end of my patience, vented my frustrations about Jessica. Enough is enough. We only let you live here because you said you would help with the housework. If you're not going to do anything, then please leave this house. Jessica looked surprised for a moment, but then sneered. Excuse me? Aren't you the one living here off my brother's income? As a mere housewife, living off my brother's hard-earned money. How dare you tell me to leave? If you have a problem, why don't you be the one to leave this house? She doesn't get it. This house was a precious gift that I received from my father. If I back down now, it'll be exactly what she wants. I have to fight back. This house was passed down to me from my father, meaning it's under my name, Jessica. You have no right to tell me anything. So what? Jessica looked down on me and said, "You're going to drive out a mother with a 10-month-old child? If you can, do it, you heartless woman!" At that moment, the emotions I had been suppressing exploded. I've reached my limit. I'll make her regret ever looking down on me. I turned to face Jessica. Fine, I'll leave. Do whatever you want. What? Everyone in the room was taken aback. Jessica then started to smirk. Oh, really? Sorry about that. Well, a mother raising a child is more important than just a housewife like you. With a mocking tone, Jessica took her daughter and left the room. Hey, Emma, what was that all about? My husband, John, and my mother-in-law were shocked. To them, I revealed a plan I had been concocting. 2 weeks later, the day to execute the plan had come. Jessica, I'm leaving. Without taking her eyes off her phone, Jessica just shooed me away. Yeah, goodbye. Don't come back, okay? Then, John and my mother-in-law came in. We're leaving too. Huh? Jessica was caught off guard by John's statement. Wait! What does that mean? I thought only Emma was leaving. There's no way that's true. Both your mother and I are on Emma's side. We're cutting ties with such an unreasonable sister like you. What? How dare you? My mother-in-law also counters my husband. It seems like we made a mistake raising you. We sincerely apologize to Emma. We don't think of you as our daughter anymore. From now on, do as you please. Wait! Just hold on a sec. Are you just going to abandon me, Mom? You'll never see your grandchild again. Unfazed, Jessica's mother brushed her off. I don't care. All you ever did was demand baby gifts, and I never got to see my grandchild anyway. Please don't use me only when it suits you. No. Mom. Jessica's face gradually turns pale, but I have no intention of helping her now. I decided to give her a final, ultimate revenge. Oh, by the way, we're selling this house, so you should find a place to live by the end of the month. Sell? This house? Jessica is in a complete state of shock. Wait a second. You're joking, right? It's not easy finding a place to live. We don't care. We're moving, so goodbye. Wait! Please, forgive me. I promise I won't complain anymore. Please, take me with you. Jessica was screaming and begging, but we ignored her. We took only the essential belongings, and John, his mother, and I moved to our new home. Jessica, left without a place to go, ended up living at her ex-husband's house. His debts are still accumulating, and now Jessica has no choice but to work part-time. If she had behaved decently in our house, none of this would have happened. Truly, she reaped what she sowed. However, there is a part of me that is grateful. Thanks to this, we were able to move to a wheelchair-accessible apartment. John's mother can now move around much more without any help. The security is also well established, so even if Jessica comes to visit in the future, we won't be bothered as we were before. John and his mother still feel guilty, but since we gave Jessica a taste of her own medicine, I'm not too bothered. Just being able to live happily with John and his mother is enough to make me feel blessed. From now on, I want to take care of those who care for me. I sincerely hope that the house we inherited from my father goes to someone wonderful.
My name is Belle. I'm a 31-year-old working mom, living with my husband Davy, who's the same age and works a regular job, and our 5-year-old daughter Lenny, who's recently become quite the chatterbox. We're just your average family, neither rich nor poor, and we get along great. But a storm was about to hit our peaceful home. That storm was my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away, and mother-in-law lived alone. When Davy and I got married, we had agreed not to live with her. It just seemed easier that way. Davy was her only child, born when she was older. We'd been married for 5 years, and mother-in-law was getting on in age. Living alone at her age could be tough and even dangerous. Davy would visit her when he could, but it seemed like she was struggling. Seeing my husband trying so hard on his own, I made a decision. We would live with mother-in-law. If my beloved husband was doing his best, how could I, his wife, not support him? I mustered up the courage and suggested living together to Davy. He looked surprised and asked, "Are you sure?" Honestly, I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I felt something needed to change. I couldn't do much with housework, childcare, and my part-time job. If anything happened to mother-in-law, Davy would be the one to handle it. After discussing these important matters, we started living together. Thank you, Belle. Truly, thank you. On a spring day with cherry blossoms falling, mother-in-law arrived at our home, tears in her eyes. I thought living with such a humble mother-in-law would be smooth sailing, but I was wrong. At first, she was reserved, but as days went by, her true colors showed. She began to torment me. I realized I had misjudged her. Belle, this dish is too salty for me. Can you make it lighter? When I did, she'd say, Why is it so bland? Are you mocking the elderly? How rude! And that was just the beginning. Please hand wash all my clothes. They'll get ruined in the machine. They're all expensive, you know. When I suggested dry cleaning, she'd retort, That's wasteful. You lived comfortably thanks to my son, so stop wasting money and start saving. If only she'd pay for her own clothes. Clearly, she was just trying to annoy me. And that was just the beginner's level. Intermediate level torment went like this. Belle, are you wearing makeup? It won't help. You're too plain. I'm so glad our granddaughter looks like my son. He takes after me, so she looks like me. Her future is bright. Yet mother-in-law would spend over 2 hours on her makeup every morning. She looked like a completely different person without it. I respect her desire to look beautiful, but isn't her foundation a bit too pale? And her cheeks are oddly red. And her bright red lipstick leaves marks on every cup. I'd never say this out loud because it's rude to comment on someone's appearance. But what I can't forgive is her throwing away my precious makeup set. When I came home from my part-time job, it was all gone. Mother-in-law nonchalantly said she'd thrown it away. When I asked why, she said, I've told you before, makeup won't help you. It's a waste of money. Save, save. From now on, live without makeup. Aren't I the most thoughtful family member? You should be grateful. Grateful? As if. If this were a mountain, I'd surely scream at the top of my lungs. Let the echo carry my frustrations, making sure mother-in-law heard it over and over. But alas, this isn't a mountain. What's worse, mother-in-law only torments me when we're alone. She always waits for moments when my husband is away and our daughter is at kindergarten. I don't want to badmouth her to my husband since she's his mother, but I wish he'd listen. After much thought, I hinted at my frustrations, but it barely made a difference. I'll talk to Mom. He tried to address it, but mother-in-law would cry, claiming, I never did such a thing. He even went so far to say, My wife is trying to trick me. My husband was left confused. I felt helpless. Well, they say seeing is believing. Seeing is believing. I decided to secretly record my interactions with my mother-in-law to show my husband. Now, where to place the camera? As I pondered, the advanced level of mother-in-law's torment began. We started living with mother-in-law in the spring. After a hot summer and a fading autumn, one winter day came. My husband was away on a business trip, and our daughter was staying at my parents' house. It was snowing outside. I usually bike to my part-time job, but due to the snow, I walked and returned in the evening. After coming home, I'd usually clean, do laundry, and then cook dinner. But let me remind you, it's winter, nighttime, and it's snowing heavily. It's not the best time for hand-washing laundry. Yet, mother-in-law cheerfully handed me her laundry, saying, Here's today's laundry. They're delicate, so make sure, absolutely sure, you hand-wash them. She emphasized because she knew it would annoy me. I'll wash them with warm water then. No, you can't. The colors will fade, and it'll damage them. Absolutely, absolutely wash them with cold water. So outside? It's snowing. Don't be silly. I lost it and yelled, This is ridiculous. Why should I hand wash with cold water on such a cold day? If they're that precious, wash them yourself. How dare you? I'm an elderly woman. Expecting me to wash with cold water? Are you out of your mind? Are you out of your mind, mother-in-law? I'm always in my right mind. If that's true, it's even worse. She probably didn't expect me to fight back. Mother-in-law glared at me, her face red with anger. But I wasn't backing down. Why don't you go outside, mother-in-law? You've been indoors all day, so you might not realize how cold and snowy it is. How dare you suggest sending an elderly woman out in this cold? What kind of daughter-in-law are you? What kind of mother-in-law asks for a cold hand-washing on a day like this? If she had something to say, I'd respond. I was ready to confront her fully. I felt bad for my husband. But if we're going to live together, I can't always play the good daughter-in-law. As I glared back at mother-in-law, she suddenly grabbed my hand. Ah! Before I could think about it, my mother-in-law pulled my hand. She was surprisingly strong for her age. Before I knew it, she had pushed me out of the front door. The next thing I knew, the door was locked. Mother-in-law! You're not the kind of daughter-in-law I want. Get out! This is my house. You should be the one leaving. But my shouts fell on deaf ears with mother-in-law. She seemed intent on locking me out. No matter how much I banged on the door, there was no response. I was in a bind. I wasn't wearing a coat, and I didn't have my house keys. Luckily, I had my cell phone in my pocket. I tried calling the house. I could hear the ringtone from the other side of the door, but mother-in-law didn't answer. With no other choice, I called my husband, who was due back from his business trip that day, but he didn't pick up. I sent him a message. Mother-in-law locked me out. It's snowing heavily and I'm freezing. I'm heading to the nearby grocery store for shelter. Please get in touch ASAP. I began my trek to the grocery store. I considered seeking help at a police box, but it was far from here. Given the heavy snow, it would take even longer. The grocery store seemed like the safest bet. I hugged myself, trying to stay warm. My breath was visible in the cold. The snow showed no signs of stopping. The snow is accumulating more and more. Cars, bikes, and even bicycles were nowhere to be seen. It was late, and the streets were almost deserted. I trudged on. But when I finally reached the grocery store, I was met with a sign. Closed due to heavy snow. The one place I had hoped to find refuge was closed. What a day! My only option now was the police box. I wondered how long it would take to walk there in the snow. Feeling increasingly desperate, I continued on. I could no longer feel my fingers or toes. Checking the time on my phone, an hour had passed since I was locked out. I tried calling home again, but mother-in-law still didn't answer. As I walked through the transformed cityscape, heading for the police box, I suddenly heard a cry. Help! I stopped in my tracks. I was near a bridge over a river. I strained my ears. Help me! I heard it clearly this time. I rushed towards the voice and looked down from the bridge. There, in the not-so-deep river, was a lady, fallen and calling for help. I hurried down the riverbank to her. The icy river water stung my feet. The cold was so intense it felt painful, but I managed to reach the lady. Are you okay? I can't move. It's so cold. Hang in there. Had the arrival of help made her relax? The lady leaned against me and lost consciousness. What do I do? This is bad. I couldn't feel my hands or feet, and they wouldn't move as I wanted. Someone help! My desperate cry echoed in vain. I thought it was over. Then I heard a man's voice. Hey, are you okay? My husband's face came into view. The moment I saw him rushing towards me with a panicked expression, I blacked out. When I woke up, I was staring at a white ceiling. Belle, are you awake? My husband looked down at me with a worried face. I was in a hospital. Apparently, he had pulled both the lady and me out of the river and called an ambulance. That had been yesterday, and I had been asleep ever since. How was your trip? It went well. I couldn't answer when you called because I was on the bus. I tried calling back when I got to the bus stop, but you didn't pick up. There were no taxis running, so I ran home. I just happened to see you going into the river. What luck! I thought you had jumped in, but it seems it was the lady. According to my husband, the lady I tried to help had jumped into the river in despair. But the cold water had snapped her back to reality, and she tried to get out but couldn't move because she was so cold. If we had found her any later, it might have been too late. So the lady was okay. Relieved, I felt sleepy. You should rest. You must be exhausted. Comforted by my husband's kind words, I drifted off to sleep. All the while, my anger towards mother-in-law simmered. A few days in the hospital, I was back to my old self. Standing in front of my home after so long, I froze. Mother-in-law hadn't visited me once while I was hospitalized. Of course, there was no apology. She had locked me out on a snowy night, nearly causing my death. Honestly, I couldn't live with her anymore. Feeling down, I opened the front door. I stepped into it and was surprised. To my surprise, Mother-in-law was there, deeply apologizing. What? Mother-in-law? What's going on? Belle, I'm so sorry. I was stunned by Mother-in-law's unexpected apology. Really? An unexpected apology? This is leaving me speechless. Mother-in-law continued. I never imagined something like that would happen. I truly regret locking you out. Please forgive me. What? She's sorry? This mother-in-law? The one who's always been so aggressive towards me? The one who locked me out in the snow? Suspicious. Very suspicious. It would be strange if there wasn't a catch. I narrowed my eyes at mother-in-law. What will you do if I don't forgive you? Mother-in-law's hand twitched slightly. I was freezing out there, you know. If my husband hadn't come, who knows what would have happened. Anyone would know what happens if you lock someone out in a snowstorm. If you didn't, does that mean you're not normal? I said sarcastically. Mother-in-law's face turned bright red. What did you just say? You think you can take advantage when someone's being nice? Don't get too cocky. My son said he'd end our living arrangement if I didn't apologize, so I did it. Now that I've apologized, let's forget about the whole locking out incident. Now, get back to your chores. She took the bait so easily. I smirked, seeing right through Mother-in-law's true intentions. Wow. Her remorse was all a lie. People don't change that easily, do they? Especially not someone like Mother-in-law. But just as I thought that, she started her antics again. Make sure you hand wash my clothes with water. Are you still on about that? Still demanding hand washing? Only cook what I like. If it's not tasty, I'll throw it away. This is hopeless, absolutely hopeless. She's beyond redemption. I sighed heavily and looked back. You're saying all this, huh? My husband, who had been standing a bit away, was out of Mother-in-law's sight. But he had been there the whole time. Mother-in-law's beloved son, my husband, was right there. Davy, what about work? Mother-in-law noticed him and turned. I took the day off to be with Belle. But Mom, you haven't changed at all. No, I was just joking. Joking? It's not funny at all. I told you to genuinely apologize to Belle and never do such things again. But I did apologize. You're about to revert to your mean self. That was just a joke. That's why it's not funny. I had warned my husband to keep a distance, but Mother-in-law's reaction was as expected, or even more dramatic. She desperately tried to justify herself, and I couldn't stop laughing. Belle, what's so funny? You, on the other hand? Mom, I'm talking now. Listen to me. I'm sorry. Even Mother-in-law couldn't ignore her beloved son's words. His lecture continued, with Mother-in-law listening tearfully. Why would you be mean to Belle when she agreed to live with us out of concern for you? I might have gone a bit overboard earlier, but I've never harassed her. She's starting something. I commented on the food's taste, but I just wanted her to know my preferences. I asked for my clothes to be dry cleaned, but Belle said it was a waste and would hand wash them. I've told her to wear makeup, but she threw away her cosmetics right in front of me. Which mouth is saying that? It seems Mother-in-law wants to believe she's not at fault. I can't help it. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Today's laundry, it's expensive, so definitely hand wash it. Mother-in-law's voice played clearly. Ah! She screamed and tried to grab my phone. I dodged her and continued playing. Definitely wash it with water. You're not the kind of daughter-in-law I want. Get out. The sound of her dragging me out and shutting the door, ignoring my pleas. All of my mother-in-law's violent actions that day were recorded. I secretly recorded our conversations on this phone. Whenever I talk to mother-in-law, I always have my phone on record. Thank goodness for my phone, or things could have been really bad.
Mom, any rebuttal?
My husband asked, and my mother-in-law was speechless.
Anything else to say?
Is there anything left to say?
Yes.
What do you mean?
This is the end. You've trampled on my feelings of wanting to care for you. I want you to leave.
What?
I'm cutting ties. You can live on your own. We won't contact you again. Even if you reach out, we'll ignore it and won't meet.
What?
You sold the family home, right? You should have all that money. Plus, with your pension, you should be fine. We won't help.
But wait, Davy. Are you abandoning me? Betraying your only family?
You're the one who betrayed us.
My husband's angry voice left mother-in-law speechless. She sat down, unable to say another word. The only sound was the dripping of melted snow from the roof. Then things moved quickly. While mother-in-law sat there, lifeless, my husband and I packed her belongings. Her hometown was a 2-hour train ride from our place. She had distant relatives there, but she'd been estranged from them for so long that no one would probably care now. She rarely went out when she lived with us, so she likely didn't have any friends. Maybe that's why she had so much time to harass us, but now it didn't matter. Bye, Grandma. My daughter waved at mother-in-law. Seeing her cheerful granddaughter waving without a hint of sadness, mother-in-law finally broke down into tears. The taxi carrying mother-in-law drove off, leaving behind her sobs. I felt nothing. It was her own doing. With that thought, I entered our home, feeling refreshed. Time passed. Rumors said mother-in-law lived alone in an apartment. We still received calls from her, so she must be alive. But we never met or spoke to her, just as we promised. She'll probably live a lonely life. She destroyed the happiness she had, and the price was steep. With mother-in-law gone, peace returned to my heart. While listening to the washing machine, I served tea to an unexpected guest. It was an elderly woman, the very same lady I had saved on that snowy day. She had been living a lonely life, filled with despair. But the cold river water that day made her want to live a bit longer. My son offered to live with me, she said. That's wonderful. His wife is lovely, but I didn't want to be a burden, so I decided to move nearby instead. That's nice. I've been lonely since my husband passed away. I thought life had nothing good left, but I was wrong. I'm glad you realized that. As long as I'm alive, there's hope. Thank you for saving me that day. I smiled back at Lady's grateful face. A lady who lived her life with determination and found happiness. Mother-in-law who ruined her chance to live with her son and his family. There are so many ways to grow old. Everyone's path is different. But our own attitudes shape whether our later years are happy or sad. Seeing these two elderly women, I had a vague idea of the kind of future I wanted. To ensure a happy future, and to protect the peaceful days I have now, I reminded myself of the path I should take.
I could have never imagined, back then, that I would cross paths with them again and uncover the shocking truth that unfolded. My name's Ashley and I'm 35 years old. For the past 10 years, I devoted myself to being a full-time wife, supporting my husband Sam with unwavering dedication. We don't have any kids, but we always told each other that our love was more than enough, that having children wasn't the only way to live a fulfilling life. But then one day, Sam changed. Looking back, maybe it was just his true nature finally coming to surface. You see, my parents divorced when I was little, and I was brought up by my dad. When I was a teenager, my dad finally told me why he and my mom split up. He said it was due to incompatible personalities. Back then, I thought it was such a trivial reason to end a marriage. After all, everyone has their differences, right? But as I grew older, I painfully realized that differences in personalities, differences in core values, could indeed lead to a divorce. I had to face this harsh reality when my father was tragically killed. In a car accident last year, my father, who used to run a construction company, was a craftsman at heart. Even at the age of 70, right before he passed away, he was still actively working, and his experience and skills were highly regarded by his clients. His business thrived, even during economic downturns. He was also endorsed by the church community as a master carpenter. His unique techniques of building church using timber fitted together without nails was among his area of expertise. My father, with his dexterous hands, would always cook for me after work. Even now, I'm grateful for all the love and nutrition he provided me.
What's important is not what you get in return from others, but how much joy you can give to them.
He often told me. I try to live up to these words by devoting myself to my husband, Sam. However, after my father suddenly left this world, Sam seemed to change drastically, as if revealing a hidden side of him. Our conversations never ceased, but they often turned to the topic of my father's inheritance.
With your dad's inheritance, we can build our own house, right? We can finally move out of this old apartment and into our dream home.
I never mentioned to Sam about using my father's inheritance to build a house. I had planned to save it for our retirement. Moreover, I just couldn't use the money my father had worked so hard for to raise me as a single parent. My father was a serious man who never gambled or squandered his money on frivolous activities. Because of this, he left behind a significant amount of wealth. Up until now, I had always been open with Sam about everything. However, seeing the glint in his eye as he eyed my father's inheritance, I found myself lying about the exact amount. We can't afford to buy a house. My father must have spent a lot on drinks and pachinko because he was lonely. There is much less left than you think, Sam.
But there's still enough to build a house, right?
No, there's not. We might be able to buy a rundown second-hand house, though. Sam looked as if his world was ending. His eyes were lifeless, like those of a dead fish. It was my first time realizing how money could change a person. I even began to doubt if Sam had stayed with me in hopes of getting his hands on my father's inheritance. However, about 6 months later, on a weekend while I was doing chores and Sam was watching TV, he said,
I have something to tell you.
For the first time since he proposed, he was addressing me with a serious expression, and I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. I sat down across from him, and as I observed his face, a tear streamed down his cheek. What?
I've made you feel bad by acting like I was only interested in your dad's money, haven't I? We don't have children, so we should have plenty of time to enjoy together, but I haven't put any effort into it. Thank you for always being with me without any complaints, even though I leave all the housework to you and we rarely go out on my days off.
Upon hearing these words, I felt a mixture of joy and regret for ever doubting him. Tears of joy mixed with tears of regret and fell heavily from my eyes. The look in Sam's eyes as he gently hugged me was the same as when I fell in love with him. As I felt his warmth radiate through my body, I truly felt glad that I married him. From that day forward, no matter how tired he was after work, Sam would always help me with my chores. On his days off, he would even try cooking dishes that he had never cooked before. He didn't get upset even when I was strict with him. Seeing him overcome each challenge made my heart flutter. I felt proud that I had chosen him as my husband, and we lived each day as if we were newlyweds again. But then, 6 months later, things started to change when a letter arrived in our mailbox. Here, this letter was in the mailbox today. It's for you, Sam. Sam opened the envelope carefully with a pair of scissors.
Wow, it's been 20 years since I graduated from high school. I've been invited several times, but I never went.
The envelope contained an invitation to a reunion from his high school friends. I knew he had been invited to these reunions several times since we got married, but he had always declined out of consideration for me, who had no connection with his classmates. I told him that he should definitely go this time. Don't worry about me, you should go and have a good time with your classmates. After some hesitation, Sam decided to attend the reunion and began preparations for it, which was scheduled to take place in a month. Sam, who rarely went out with anyone other than me, didn't have any stylish clothes and his hairstyle was a mess. He told me that because he could be completely open with me, he didn't feel the need to dress up. Well, I have always been a bit clueless about fashion, and I believe that it's what's inside a person that matters, not the outside. However, since the invitation to the reunion arrived, our dates turned into a tour of men's clothing stores, and I found myself tagging along every week. I realized that his sudden interest in fashion was because of the reunion, but ever since that letter arrived, Sam would often come home late from work. He usually arrived home by 7 p.m., but it became common for him to come home past 9 p.m. He insisted it was due to overtime, and I couldn't verify if his words were true. Sam was the one managing our financial statements, and I hadn't seen them before. I also didn't want to call his company as it felt like I was doubting him. 3 days later, with 2 weeks left until the reunion, Sam returned from work and sat me down in the living room chair to share some news.
My sister, Michelle, she's just broken up with her boyfriend she was living with. And now she's staying at a friend's house. But the friend's husband is coming back from a business trip next month. And she'll have no place to live. I have to do something for my sweet little sister.
I completely understood Sam's concern for his sister. I have a younger brother who's currently working overseas. Even after I got married, I worried about him and often contacted him. He's a dependable guy, just like our father, but he's too nice and easily deceived. I felt like it was my mission to protect him. So I wanted to help Sam's sister, but since the wedding, I hadn't seen or contacted her. I felt reluctant to use my father's inheritance for someone I barely knew, so I kept quiet.
Ashley, didn't your father love helping people, yet why won't you help my sister?
My premonition was right. Sam wanted to help his sister using my father's inheritance. He desperately asked me to give a part of my father's inheritance to Michelle, but I was firm in my decision. I told you before, I have no intention of using my father's inheritance. I decided to save it for a time when we might really need it. Then Sam muttered, "Huh," and locked himself in his room. Since then, he started avoiding me. We would have meals together, but he never initiated conversation, and no matter how cheerfully I tried to talk, a cold atmosphere remained. 2 days later, I was looking at cakes in a pastry shop trying to improve Sam's mood. It was then that I felt an odd gaze and turned around. There stood my ex-boyfriend, the one I dated when I was in middle school.
Is it you, Ashley?
Even after 20 years, we immediately recognized each other, which made me burst out laughing. We had lost touch since high school, and I had no idea what he had been up to, but it was quite something to meet him here. He had recently returned to our hometown and was appreciating its charm. After buying our cakes, we decided to catch up at a cafe.
Ashley, you haven't changed a bit.
There is no way. It's been 20 years, and you haven't changed either. This exchange felt out of the ordinary, and I found it exhilarating. We talked and laughed for a while, but when the conversation turned to love stories, his expression suddenly darkened, and I didn't know how to respond.
I, recently broke up with my girlfriend, and all I do is regret it.
Why did you break up?
I couldn't provide her the emotional support that she needed.
For a moment, the word cheating crossed my mind, but what he said next was something even I could deeply understand. It seems his ex-girlfriend has always had a weak constitution and can't work long hours, so she has only ever worked part-time. Despite knowing this, they started dating. But as he became more and more successful in the marketing industry, she felt she couldn't keep up with him and chose to step back.
I have achieved success in my work and can provide a luxurious life, so I told her she shouldn't blame herself even if she can't work much. But she never listened to me and cried all the time.
Hearing this, I felt that he was at fault. You're just bragging about yourself and putting pressure on your ex-girlfriend. I'm sure she didn't want a luxurious life but felt lonely because you were too absorbed in your work. Apparently, because of his busy work schedule, he would only go home twice a week and he didn't even text her daily. Hearing this, I could painfully relate to his ex-girlfriend's position and couldn't help raising my voice. How did your ex-girlfriend put up with this? If I were her and this kind of neglect went on, I would have broken up with you. No matter how busy you are with work, you have been too neglectful. And you knew she couldn't work. Why didn't you care for her more? The truth is, something similar happened between me and my husband. Around our 3rd year of marriage, I was dealing with infertility treatments and ended up in a depressive state, both physically and mentally drained. Despite this, my husband, who claimed to be busy with work, never once asked me if I was okay. He apologized and improved after I expressed my hardship, but that painful memory still haunts me to this day. Seeing how desperate I was, my ex-boyfriend seemed to realize his mistake. He said he wanted to get back together with his ex, but lacked the courage to act on it. Not wanting to leave him in trouble, I offered my help. In return, he listened to my grievances about my husband and we spent our time together fruitfully. That's what I thought, but a shocking revelation left me stunned.
She has an older brother, and his wife is really cold-hearted. Despite being a stay-at-home wife, she doesn't do any chores and squanders money on night outs. Apparently, he's considering divorce, but she won't sign the divorce papers.
That's terrible. I can't believe he's still putting up with her.
I think so too. That's why he's secretly planning to let loose at an upcoming reunion.
A reunion? The word rang my bell. Comparing the details about his ex-girlfriend's brother and my husband, the shocking truth emerged. His recent ex-girlfriend was none other than my husband's sister, Michelle. We were both left speechless by this bizarre coincidence. We shared everything about our domestic situations, and he began to get angry on my behalf.
Your husband is lying. He's using his sister to get to your father's wealth?
We decided to tell my husband the following day. My husband finishes work at 5:30 p.m. Counting backwards from his usual arrival time of 9 p.m., he should leave his office around 8:20 p.m. We watched as he left his office 10 minutes past his regular time and headed towards an unfamiliar mountain. He stopped at a log house and we spotted a woman embracing him with open arms. My husband had been cheating on me in this hidden place? Realizing that it would be difficult for us to gather solid evidence, we decided to hire a professional private investigator. After that, we returned to the local area without assaulting the log house, devised a strategy in the car, and when we acted from the next day, another unforgivable truth emerged for me. Looking further into the log house, we discovered that my husband had bought it for $70,000 in cash, hiding the money from me. To add insult to injury, a woman with children was living there.
To repay his debt, he was planning to use my ex-girlfriend, who is his sister? I'm glad you didn't give him the money. Actually, if you had, it would undoubtedly have been spent on his mistress.
You're right. I never thought he would hide such a large amount of money. It feels like he's mocking me. Maybe we should confront him together. My ex-boyfriend agreed with me and reached out to his ex-girlfriend. His ex-girlfriend, crying, asked why he had contacted her, but when we told her what we had found out, she immediately wanted to meet me. The next day, the three of us had our first meal together at a family restaurant, our eyes lighting up at the long-awaited reunion. I'm sorry, I haven't seen you since the wedding. My brother told me not to meet you because you hate me.
Wait a minute. I never said I hated you. I even suggested to Sam that we should go on a trip together with you.
The realization that it was Sam who had caused the rift between Michelle and me made me angry. From the beginning of our marriage, Sam was a liar, and I blamed myself for trusting him. The tears of regret spilled out uncontrollably. I suppose seeing me in this state must have brought back some emotions for the two of them. In the end, the three of us shed tears together as the quiet moments passed by. Speaking on behalf of my ex-boyfriend, I conveyed his feelings to his ex-girlfriend. She admitted, I have a strange kind of pride. I ended up envying my boyfriend who was more capable at work than I was, and as a result, I couldn't be honest and rely on him. It was a horrifying realization that a minor misunderstanding or assumption between a man and a woman could lead to a major tragedy. From then on, they swore to speak with consideration for each other and they got back together. Oh, I'm relieved. I was wondering what to do if it didn't work out, but I'm glad everything turned out fine. Despite the trouble my brother has caused, thank you for helping me. Now it's our turn to support you. 3 days later, it was finally time to strike back. The day arrived when my husband was going to a reunion. I started packing my things as soon as I saw off my husband, who was in a good mood since morning. The reunion was going to be held at an inn about 2 hours away by car from here, with an overnight stay, so the deadline was the next evening. I scheduled to make it in time. Thanks to the help of my ex-boyfriend and his girlfriend, I had extra time and was able to throw away the photos of my memories with my husband. It's strange how love works. I felt refreshed, even though those were photos I cherished so much. What we decided in our discussion was to sell this house first. It was heart-wrenching to sell this house, a memento of my father, but I'm sure he would understand. The following morning, I asked a moving company to transport our belongings to my husband's parents' house. When we three went to my husband's parents' house and told them the truth, they were furious, saying, "We don't remember raising a villain who deceives his sister and wife." They said they would cut ties with their son but treat me as their real daughter. That day, we all spent a pleasant time at my husband's parents' house. And then the next day, I got a call from my husband saying that the reunion was over and he was coming home, and just as I expected, he said this. As soon as I put it on speaker so that everyone could hear, my husband's quarrelsome voice echoed through the room.
Hey, let me ask you again. You're not going to give me the house even though I want to take care of my sister, right?
No, I'm not.
Then get out of the house by the end of today.
The old me would have cried if he said something like this, but at that moment not a single tear came out. That's because I now have strong allies, my ex-boyfriend and my husband's family. All right, but you can only stay in the house for another 3 days. My husband was silent for a moment, seeming unable to comprehend the situation.
Huh? Well, what do you mean? It's your father's house, right?
Don't try to respect my father now.
I'm going to buy souvenirs. Let's eat together.
My husband suddenly started trying to please me, but it was too late. 3 hours later, he called again, panting and flustered.
Hey, where did you go? There's only my stuff left. What's going on?
Then the next moment, my husband's sister screamed at the phone, "It's disgusting to try and turn Ashley's house into a love nest with your mistress." At his sister's sudden shout, my husband seemed confused and the room fell silent for a moment. 3 seconds later, my husband spoke in a voice that was almost screaming.
It's Michelle, right? Well, why are you with Ashley? What's going on?
I have nothing to say to a brother who betrays his wife without hesitation anyway. I'm coming home now, so wait. After saying this, Michelle ended the call and headed to our parents' house with the divorce papers I had signed. An hour later, she returned with the divorce papers signed by my husband, Sam. Thank you. This is the end. Our family home will be sold in 3 days, and I'm receiving alimony from Sam. I never thought my life would become this chaotic, but it's for the best. Since then, I have been staying at my ex-husband's family home, focusing on studying for the caregiving certification I have always wanted to pursue. My ex-husband sold the log house he owned and seems to be living quietly in a small apartment with a woman he had an affair with. I feel so refreshed now, thinking if you're satisfied with such a man, go ahead and have him. I'm confident that a better person than my ex-husband will come into my life. As I tell myself, keep going, Ashley. Every day I'm living a fulfilling life.
My name is Susan. I have a husband, Mark, who has a younger sister that he absolutely adores. Perhaps because of the age gap and the fact that she was weak when she was little. My husband has always doted on his little sister. It seems that my parents-in-law also wanted to be a cute girl, and she grew up splendidly selfish, and when I got married, it was rough. She made quite a scene during our wedding, wanting to wear a dress herself and insisting she should be the one to cut the cake with my husband. She even tried to convince our parents to cancel the wedding. Despite all this, I was young and thought it would all be okay as long as she wasn't nearby, so I went ahead with the marriage. In hindsight, perhaps I should have reconsidered. I'm just coming over to hang out. Let me stay the night. Tomorrow, you will show me the sights. Sightseeing? But she lives in the next city over, doesn't she? Besides, both you and I have work tomorrow, and we haven't prepared for an overnight guest. It's no big deal. I'll take a day off and take her around. Indeed, he'd even take time off work, just for her. Even after our marriage, my husband's doting on his sister didn't stop. Every weekend she would come over, eat lunch and dinner with us, and then stay the night. One time, she found the estimate I had hidden for a trip and said, "You're going on a trip, big bro? I want to come too." And he just said, "Well, can't be helped. I'll pay for it." So she ended up coming on our trip too, which of course made me very angry. It caused a huge fight after she left. "I can't believe you! That estimate was for our honeymoon. But you shouldn't have left it somewhere she could find it. And how is it inside the shelf of my private desk an easy-to-find place?" "Well, she found it, so there's nothing we can do about it now." "We're canceling the trip then." "But you were so excited about it." "Well, now I'm not. She's going to be so upset." "Fine, why don't you two go then? The estimate covers 2 people anyway." "You're right, we'll do that." And he really did go on the trip with just his sister, and he paid for all of it. This was the only time I thought about divorcing, but I didn't think about divorce because I thought I couldn't do it unless there was something bigger. When they came back from the trip, she said, "That was fun. Here's the laundry, Susan. Why do I have to wash your clothes? You're the sister-in-law, right? So you wash them." I don't know what she means by "so," but that's just how it is. This is the state of affairs for everything. "I wish you would say something, dear." No, Amanda's weak. She couldn't handle it. If she's so weak that she can't handle household chores, I don't think she should be traveling. When I said that sarcastically, my husband replied, "Well, you should have come with us then. Right? It's your fault for being stubborn and not coming." Suddenly, I was the one being blamed. It's normal for a newlywed couple not to want the sister-in-law tagging along on their honeymoon, but to these two, it seemed I was the odd one out for not wanting to join their super fun trip. Indeed, you missed out. They joyously talked about their adventure, leaving me out. My sister-in-law, Amanda, was always hanging around my husband, and after several years of our marriage, she finally got married herself. Amanda's husband lived far away, so we were pleased about the upcoming marriage because it would create some distance between us. After Amanda got married, the visits she used to make suddenly disappeared, and we were having the first peaceful time since our marriage. Then, Amanda had a baby girl. We, my husband and I, celebrated the birth, and it seemed like we were finally able to have a normal relationship with our in-laws. But then, my husband brought Amanda and our niece home. "From today, we're taking care of these two. We'll provide for all their needs, so I hope you're okay with that." "What? Why? What happened to her husband?" "Apparently, he was having an affair, and when she confronted him, he became violent, so she fled. She's planning on divorcing him, but she doesn't have a place to stay, right? We have spare rooms, so I thought it's a good idea." "This is temporary, right?" "Of course not. It's for good. Amanda never worked a day in her life. We can support her." I was getting dizzy. I knew he adored his sister, but I didn't expect this. What does Amanda think about this? "I can't work because of my health, and I've been a stay-at-home mom, so I can't live any differently." "So you don't plan on leaving? You want to abandon a single mother? Besides, you don't have any children. Consider this a trial run." I burst out laughing. Until now, I had thought that divorce would not be possible without a lot of trouble. But the moment I realized that this was a lot of trouble, I thought that I could get a divorce, and laughter welled up. What's so funny? You're creeping me out. Have you lost your mind? Maybe I have. Well, that's how it is, so deal with it. All right, you two can use my room. Seeing my apparent agreement, my husband smiled in relief, but I added, all right, so I'm getting a divorce. He looked shocked. What? That way, you'll have an extra room, and you can take care of Amanda and her daughter all you want. Yes, if I divorce, my room will become available, and my sister-in-law can continue to be a housewife as she has been doing so far. I can find someone else to do the housework. It's no different from supporting me. All I'm doing is divorcing and moving out of the house. What? Then who's going to do the housework? Amanda, you're a housewife, right? How about you do it? That's what being a housewife is about, right? Why should I? I didn't ask for this. Well, neither did I. So we're in the same boat, aren't we? Saying this, I returned to my room and began to pack my belongings. You're telling me I have to support us alone? Of course. Did you claim you could support us knowing you couldn't? Faced with this, my husband's face became tight. Seems like that's true, huh? But I won't have anything to do with it anymore. We can discuss the rest later. Saying this, I left the house in the middle of the night. I got a hotel and contacted my parents. My parents were shocked at the unexpected call in the middle of the night, but they understood when I explained the situation, telling me I could return home tomorrow. Calls kept coming in from my husband and my sister-in-law on my cell phone, but it was too noisy, so I turned off the phone and went to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, there were a mountain of voicemail and emails. The general content was, I'm sorry for the sudden change. I'm waiting for your call. Sorry for the sudden request, but I have nowhere to go as I've also run away. Please come back. Please listen to what I have to say. Alongside these pleas were messages like, stop sulking and come back. I won't be responsible for your belongings. You're my brother's wife, so you better not defy me. Come back soon and make dinner, okay? Threatening emails like this, and even some with violent language, had come in. I copied all of them and got them printed out at a convenience store on the way back to my parents' house. When I arrived at my parents' house, they greeted me, saying, why did you put up with this for so long? You should have come back sooner. Absolutely. You are going to divorce him, right? They were even angrier than I was. I had been worried about being scolded or being told that divorcing over something like this was an overreaction. But my anxiety and tension were released and I broke down, crying. I explained everything that had happened. How I had reached my breaking point when my husband brought home my sister-in-law and niece. They suggested that I should first contact my in-laws. After all, since I had left, I had not heard anything from my in-laws. It made me wonder, why hadn't my doting sister-in-law returned to her parents' house, despite being cheated on? I decided to ask. When I went to visit my parents-in-law, it seemed that my sister-in-law's husband, Christopher, was also there. I explained that my sister-in-law and niece were currently living with my husband, that I had rejected this, and ran away to my parents' house. I see. So Amanda said that. Is that not true? I didn't expect Christopher to do such a thing, though. The one having an affair is Amanda. We even have evidence. I see. I understood after hearing from my sister-in-law's husband. She wouldn't be able to go to her parents-in-law's house then. I understand we have spoiled her, but I didn't expect it to go this far. I'm really sorry for causing trouble to Susan, too. Then it occurred to me. I wondered if my husband knew the truth and was hiding it. Actually, I think my husband knew and brought her home on purpose. I believe so. Amanda often said she was going to visit your husband on the days she was cheating, and we received photos of them dining together. But since you weren't in the photos, we grew suspicious and found out she was having an affair. It seems my sister-in-law used my husband as an alibi. With that in mind, I decided to draw out the two who seemed to still be hiding from my in-laws. I sent a single email to my husband. After thinking it over, I feel sorry for Amanda who was cheated on, and I think I should hear her out one more time. I'll come home tonight, so please wait for me. Deciding just to send that, I plan to go to my house at night, bringing my sister-in-law's husband and my in-laws. I had my sister-in-law's husband wait at the front door and rang the bell. When I rang the bell, I could hear the sound of someone rushing to the front door. As I opened the front door and said, "I'm home," both my sister-in-law and husband came out. "You're late. Are you going to make dinner?" "I'm hungry." "Finally, you're back." The house was so messy that there was barely any room to step. It was hard to believe it had only been left unattended for a day. Seeing this, my mother-in-law pressed her temples. My father-in-law turned red-faced. My sister-in-law and husband, who had made it to the front door, turned pale-faced. And I was amused at the contrast. "Why are Dad and Mom here? And why is Christopher here too?" "Well, I thought it would be hard to take care of everything on my own. And don't you think it's better if we get some help from your parents? I wasn't told Mom and Dad would be here. And Christopher too. You're causing trouble, even for your sister-in-law. What do you want to do?" "But having an affair is different." "What? Amanda, you were cheating." Feigning surprise, I received a glare from my sister-in-law. "Did you know?" When I looked at my husband, he was mumbling something, but he did not deny it. It seemed he knew about the affair. "So you knew, lied about it, and planned to have me take care of her." "Well, she's family, so you would trust Amanda, right? You were trying to make me do that? But if she went to in-laws' parents' house, you would definitely blame Amanda. She's a stranger to me." When I replied that, my sister-in-law said, "But I wasn't cheating. I was with my brother." I spoke with Christopher and saw the photos, but I don't know anything about it. Rather, you two were having meals together. We haven't been dining out for a while. "No, it's not like that. I didn't know about the affair, and she just asked me to take pictures to create an alibi. So please, don't divorce me." "Wait, brother!" At this point, it seemed he realized he misspoke, but it was too late. My husband, who had confessed to creating an alibi, had a face of regret. "With that, the alibi is hopeless. Your parents heard everything, you know." "No, that was my brother." "It's futile. There's plenty of evidence besides the alibi. I'm going to get a divorce." "No way." The husband of the sister-in-law pulled out documents from the bag he had. Out they came, plenty of evidence stuffed full into a brown envelope. Then he took out an IC recorder, which seemed to have recorded our current conversation. It seems it also recorded the fact that my husband was aiding in the fabrication of an alibi. "I'll be asking for a divorce too." "No, there's no need for a divorce." "Why do you think I could live with a person who knew about the affair and covered for it? Even if such a person exists, I can't. Let's get divorced." "No, no way." The mother-in-law broke down crying pathetically. The father-in-law was about to hit someone, but he was desperately holding back, and his clenched fists were trembling. Then they turned to me and bowed their heads, saying, "We will strictly supervise this child. We will take care of Sarah until everything is over. Susan, we are sorry for the trouble." The sister-in-law, whose alibi had collapsed, was disheartened and kneeled down, and my husband, who seemed to have given up, stood frozen on the spot. After that, the sister-in-law and her husband divorced. My husband and I also divorced. When we divorced, the IC recorder borrowed from the sister-in-law's husband was submitted. I received a small alimony, and my short married life came to an end. The custody of the niece was handed over to the sister-in-law's husband, and I was relieved. The sister-in-law and husband seemed to be living under the supervision of their parents, and the luxurious and arrogant life was forbidden for them, and they seemed to be living a tough life. Since then, I have occasionally been in touch with the sister-in-law's husband and have been allowed to see my niece. Thank you for that time. The sister-in-law's husband bowed his head. "No, I didn't do anything special. I waved my hand back and forth to deny it, but the sister-in-law's husband shook his head and said, "Actually, I was worried about whether I could get custody of my daughter. Custody is easier for the mother to get, and it seems that the father has a low chance of getting it unless there is a significant reason. Even though Amanda cheated on you? She's still young. It's difficult unless she can make her own decisions. But I thought I could definitely get it if there was the fact of cheating, and that the person who was involved in it will live with us at my wife's parents' house from now on." It seems that whether the fact that my husband was involved in the fabrication of the alibi could be confirmed or not was the key to whether or not he could get custody. So, I was able to get custody because Susan recognized the fact of the alibi at that time. I'm glad. It seems that Sarah can live safely. It seems that my niece will live at the sister-in-law's husband's house from now on. I am currently living at home, and I am about to move back to living alone. I can't always rely on my parents. After all, I should trust my instincts. I should have called off the marriage then. I've had enough.